Greetings, folks. Sealer here, and welcome to my first impressions and review of the premium Tier 8 German destroyer, the Z-35. Now, I picked up the ship a few days ago using the coupon Wargaming gave me for my 4th anniversary of playing World of Warships, so hopefully you'll have an impression at the end of this video whether that was a good purchase or not, if you're interested in potentially getting her. So, as I do with other ship reviews, I'm going to do some gameplay for a few minutes. I'm going to mainly focus on highlights from the first 2 matches that I had with her, and then I'll go to port and do a walkthrough of her specifications and my build. I'll do a lot of comparisons with her peer, the Tech Tree Tier 8 German destroyer, the Z-23. Now, in the first 2 matches I had with her, I had some very favorable matchmaking. Both were Tier 8 battles. This one had a Tier 6 carrier. I don't remember if the other one had a carrier as well. But I'm going to run into the Vesteros here, and I'm going to pop smoke and my Hydro. Now, where the Z-35 is similar to the Z-23, they have almost identical hit points. I think the Z-35 has 400 fewer hit points than the Bravo hull of the Z-23. They have the same Hydro, which is 5-kilometer detection on ships, 3.5 kilometers on torpedoes, and they have the same concealment at 6.2 kilometers, and the speeds are almost the same. The Z-35 is 1/2 knot slower than the Z-23. The Z-35 is 36.5 knots, and the Z-23 is 37. Now, after that, the playstyles and characteristics of these ships diverge quite rapidly. You'll notice that my smoke is already expired. So the Z-35 gets the short burst smoke generator that the Royal Navy destroyers get. So if you're familiar with playing the Royal Navy destroyers, where they have a 10-second deployment time on the smoke sticks around for 40 seconds, and the cooldown is 70 seconds, which means that you have a 30-second gap between your last puff expiring and your smoke coming up again, then you'll be familiar with the smoke mechanics on the Z-35. The Z-35 also has no speed boost, which is, again, like the Royal Navy destroyers, but so far I haven't found it to be too much of an issue. The other key difference between the Z-35 and the Z-23 is in the torpedo systems. The Z-35 has 2 racks of 4 torpedoes. These are the German battleship torpedoes. They are 6 kilometers. They have a 13,700 alpha. They are detected at 1.3 kilometers, and they go 64 knots. So this ship, with a 6.2 kilometer detection, and 6-kilometer torpedoes, can only stealth torpedo in sort of those fadeaway or ambush situations. So for those of you who regularly play lower or mid-tier U.S. Navy destroyers, are going to be familiar with the fadeaway torpedo practice, where you basically torpedo toward ships that are sailing toward you, and that way you can stay in concealment while sending the torpedoes and having them effectively sail into your torpedo spread. And in the some gameplay I have from the second match I had with her, this is the first one, I'll show you an example of where I use torpedoes to do that. So again, I've transitioned here between some scenes when, basically cutting out the areas that are a little bit slow for me. But again, this is where, you're using the short burst smoke generator to get into a position to be able to fire on targets for a few seconds. Now, the other key aspect of the Z-35 is in her gun systems. She has 5 128mm guns with a reload of 3.4 seconds. So she has a very high rate of fire for a German destroyer. Because her HE alpha is poor at 1500 per shell, and this is eclipsed by in fact, every other tier 8 destroyer in terms of HE shell alpha, her HE shell DPM is kind of middle of the road. It's 132,000 per minute, which kind of sits in the middle with like the likes of the Lightning and the Kiev and the, let's see what else, and the Shenyang. She is easily out DPM'd on the HE front by the Akizuki at 192K, the Kid and Benson at 162, the Erland at 163, the Cossack at 163, etc. Now the Fantasque and the Terrible have a base DPM on their HE of 100K per second, but they also have the main battery reload booster, which would easily outstrip the Z-35. Now, where the Z-35's guns shine is, as the case with all German ships, or at least cruisers and destroyers, is in her AP. She has an 3000 AP alpha, which gives her a DPM, a theoretical DPM of 264K per minute, which eclipses everything except a AP firing French destroyer with its main battery reload. So she even outstrips an Akizuki. Now, firing AP requires optimal opponent angling, but it is definitely the case that if you have an opponent that is broadside to you, like this Odin that I'm firing on, you definitely want to be firing AP at every moment you can. Here I'm going to run into the, or try to get a lock here on the last opponent, I think it is a Kagero, and then I'm going to transition over to some scenery from some scenes from the second match that I played as we take him down. Now in this match, I'm hunting a Yugumo that's been sort of tailing my division mates, and I'm going to get detected here. The Yugumo with the full concealment is going to have 700 meters detection on me, and he is full health. And I'm down to about 40% of my health. Now, my first two salvos here are HE, but I am going to switch to AP, and it also helps that I have my allies helping me to back me up, and they take out a huge chunk of the Yugumo's health. But with that level of engagement, I'm now able to finish off the Yugumo. And again, I'm using the AP here because the alpha on the penetrations is going to be 1,000 per shell. And that's going to give me a significant advantage. I'm going to transition here a few moments later as I've been sort of harassing this Sinop, basically who's been trying to work from concealment and working our flanks. Basically, I've been trying to keep him busy and keep him distracted. And this torpedo spread that I just sent, he is sailing into. So he did technically detect me, but this is the type of thing where you would sail in a way that you could stay concealed, fire torpedoes against an opponent who effectively sails into your torpedoes. In fact, that's the only torpedo hit I have in the ship so far. And then I'm going to fire at his bow because I get the 1/4 penetration on my HE, and I'm going to be able to penetrate the 26 millimeters on his bow. And then after this, I'm going to cut over to the port so we can do a walkthrough as Jimmy Jazz is going to get the kill on this battleship. Okay, here we are back in port with the Z-35. Again, I'll do a walkthrough of her specifications. I'll talk about my build, including upgrades, commander skills, signal considerations, and then I'll offer some final thoughts. Starting with her armor, there isn't much to talk about. It's a tier 8 destroyer with a 19mm hull and a 13mm superstructure. There's no Citadel to talk about, so that's pretty run-of-the-mill. For survivability, with Survivability Expert, her health is 21,900. Her out-of-the-box health is 19,100. The Z-23 Bravo hull has 400 more hit points than the Z-35. So they're very similar in that regard. Guns. Again, I talked about this at some length during the gameplay review. She has 5 128mm guns. They have a 3.4 second reload. The turret traverse is 22.5 seconds, which is typical of the German destroyers up through tier 8. I haven't invested in anything to improve this, whether that be expert marksman or main battery modification 2. It is something to consider. I try to rely on planning where I need my guns in advance. I did have that sort of semi-surprise encounter with the Vestros in the first match, but I had already planned on having the guns on the starboard side since that was the direction that I wanted them pointing in the direction of where the opponents were. So I had my guns in the right way, but To avoid or to manage some of those surprise encounters, it is nice to have faster turrets, something to consider. Her HE Alpha is terrible. Again, that's typical for German ships, 1500 per shell. The fire chance is okay at 6%. Where the HE shines, obviously, is in the 1/4 penetration that the German destroyers got quite recently. So she pens 32 millimeters out of the box. That means she's going to pen the bows and sterns of upper tier battleships. She's going to be able to get through a lot of plating on upper tier battleships and cruisers. So she's pretty reliable in terms of getting HE alpha from that perspective. Where her shells shine, or where her guns shine, as I mentioned in the gameplay review, is with the AP. The AP alpha is 3000. That's the highest for this size of shell. And if you can get those broadside targets and be firing AP, you're going to pretty consistently do a lot more damage than you would with HE. The maximum range is 12.1 kilometers. This is not including advanced firing training, excuse me. The shell ballistics are somewhere between the floaty shells of the U.S. Navy and the railguns of the Soviets. At 830 meters per second, they're very playable out to pretty much their full range against bigger targets. Against smaller targets, you're generally going to want to try to be within that 8 to 10 kilometer range, not quite so far out beyond that. So again, fairly typical for German destroyers from that perspective, other than the reload is faster. All right, torpedoes we talked about. Again, this is a place, again, where she is markedly different. She has 2 quadruple launchers. These are the German battleship torpedoes with a 90-second reload. They have a 13,700 alpha, which is very poor for a tier 8 destroyer. The range is 6 kilometers. The detectability is good at 1.3 kilometers, but again, you're usually detected by the time you're sending them, so they know they're on the way. The speed here that I've got is 67 knots because I have the torpedo tubes upgrade in slot 3, and again, I'll get to my upgrades here in a moment. But the base speed is 64 knots, which is decent. It's not the blindingly fast, obvious that we see now on the European destroyers, but in terms of general torpedo speed, it's pretty good. The AA is okay. It's not anything particularly remarkable. I should note that the 128s are not dual purpose. So she does not get sort of that long range bubble from her 128s. Her continuous DPS is 146, which is okay. It's kind of middle of the road. You'll be able to deal with tier 6 planes pretty easily. I think I shut down like 10 or 11 planes in the first match where I was dealing with the tier 6 carrier. Tier 8 planes you probably have a little more difficulty with. The firing range is frankly is pretty awful because she only gets up to medium range aura, which is 3.5 kilometers. So her AA is pretty poor. She's definitely not going to compare to a Kid or an Akizuki or something like that, but something to keep in mind. Maneuverability, her base speed is 36.5 knots. I have a speed signal on, so it's 38.3 here. Her turning radius is fairly big. That's, again, typical of German destroyers. They kind of sit in the middle between the very good maneuverability of the U.S. Navy and the really terrible turning circles of the Soviets. Her rudder is pretty sluggish. I have the propulsion modification upgrade in slot 4. You could bring this rudder shift down to 3.5, 3.6 in that area with the steering gears modification 2 upgrade in slot 4 instead, but I prefer to have the faster acceleration. So just something to keep in mind. This is, again, typical of German destroyers. They tend to have somewhat sluggish rudder shifts. And then her concealment, 6.2. This includes Concealment Expert, the Concealment Systems upgrade, and the Camouflage. Her detectability by air is 3 kilometers, and then her smoke firing rate or detection is 3 kilometers as well. So she's not, so kind of overall package, she's not very well concealed. She's got good health. She has solid guns. Her torpedoes are pretty lacking. Again, this is feels like a very niche destroyer from that perspective in terms of her characteristics. But I'll get to more final thoughts at the end of the review. Okay, let's go ahead and get to, actually, let me go ahead and get to our modules first. For upgrades, main armaments modification 1, this is again quite ubiquitous. It protects both your main battery and your torpedoes. There wouldn't be, I wouldn't bother trying to protect your AA because it's not that good. And if you want, detonation protection, take a Juliet Charlie signal. So main armaments modification 1 is, the go-to. For slot 2, I bought a hydroacoustic search special upgrade to extend the action time of the hydro. You could go with damage control. If you know that you're going to be getting into a lot of fights with other destroyers, try to reduce that chance of fires, or engine room protection to reduce the chance that your engine or rudder get knocked out. So all of these are viable options. I happen to take the hydroacoustic search because it's what I traditionally do on German destroyers. Part of their strength is their longer range hydro, and improving the duration of that hydro can give themselves and their team an advantage in a lot of cases. For slot 3, this would be an area of some significant consideration. You could take smoke generator modification 1 to increase the time that the smoke is deployed by 30%, but it reduces the dispersion time, basically how long the smoke sticks around, by 5%. So basically you would get a 2-second reduction in the smoke screen dispersion time, how long it sticks around, but you could extend the smoke deployment time by 3 seconds. So that could be something to consider. I put torpedo tubes modification 1 to get my torpedoes to be a little faster, so that they would get to target more quickly. You could take main battery modification 2 to improve the turret rotation. I think that would reduce the turret rotation to a little less than 20 seconds for 180 degrees. Aiming systems would be another viable choice because it improves both, tightens up your salvos, but it also improves the turret or the traverse speed of your torpedo tube. So that could be another option. I'm not sure I would invest in AA guns modification 1 to reduce the prep time on your AA sector. Her AA isn't that good anyway, so I don't think this would be a very good option. I would probably either do torpedo tubes or maybe main battery modification 2 to improve the speed of her turrets. So that's kind of up to you. Slot 4, could either be steering gears or propulsion. I want the faster off-the-line acceleration to if somebody's summoning torpedoes into my smoke or whatever, I want to improve my chances of being to hop out of smoke. Now, again, she doesn't get the speed boost, which I'll get to here in a second, but not having the speed boost is kind of a significant downside potentially in those cases that you are getting torpedoed in your smoke, and even with the hydro running, you may need to accelerate out of that, and the speed boost can definitely help in those cases. So I would recommend taking the propulsion mod to at least give yourselves some improved acceleration on getting out of your smoke or out of the way of torpedoes. And then slot 5, concealment. I really honestly can't see a clear reason to take any other upgrade for a stealth destroyer like a Z-35. Okay, the consumables I talked about again during gameplay. Damage control is ubiquitous. She gets the short burst smoke generator. She gets 6 charges by default. I have 7 here because I have superintendent. And then she gets the hydroacoustic search, 5 kilometers on ships, 3.5 on torpedoes. The action time is by default 100 seconds, and with the hydroacoustic search special upgrade, it's 120. The reload time is also 120. I have it at 114 because I happen to have a November Foxtrot signal mounted. And just again, another reminder that in 9.7 that we are able to reorder the consumables for ships. And in order to get the to make sure that the hydroacoustic search is in the same slot as it appears on other German destroyers, I put it under the fourth slot here so that I always know that U is hydro for the German destroyers. All right. And then let's see. Okay, now let's get to the commander skills. So this is the commander from my Z-52. This is kind of a run-of-the-mill destroyer, hunter / forward scout type of ship. So I like priority target. I know a lot of players that prefer preventative maintenance. There's arguments both ways. I prefer to know that when I'm detected, if people are targeting me, because I can make more informed decisions about how I operate based on whether I'm being targeted when I am detected. I would then take last stand. That's basically a necessity on all destroyers. For the next skill, I would take survivability expert to boost the HP pool of the ship. This is already a quite robust ship, and so boosting it by another 2,800 hit points is significant. And then concealment. After that, I probably would take radio location for the next 4 skill points. Excuse me. And then after that, it's your choice of whether to take adrenaline rush or the next 3-point skill. Now, there is a strong argument for the ship to take basic firing training to improve the reload on the main guns, because that is arguably her key strength, is her ability to use her guns. And because she gets 6 charges of smoke, there's less need in some sense of being able to take superintendent to increase the number of consumable charges. So if I were to have a dedicated commander for this, which I might do, I might drop superintendent and take basic firing training. So that's something to consider. Another choice here could be vigilance, which stacks on top of the hydro. So you could give yourself another basically 3/4 of a kilometer detection on torpedoes. I tend not to spec into this for destroyers. I prefer to put the 3 points into something else, but that's another option. Okay, so this is kind of my standard German destroyer build. But for the Z-35, like I said, there is a strong argument to take basic firing training instead of superintendent. All right, getting to signals really quickly. What I would take, if you have them, November Foxtrot to reduce the cooldown on your consumables, Sierra Mike to improve your speed, which is definitely useful because she does not get speed boost, and then Juliet Charlie to prevent detonations. You could take Juliet Whiskey Uni-1 to improve the chance of flooding from your torpedoes, but I right now don't see a super compelling argument because the torpedoes are such short range. They're used in very specialized situations, and you're not going to be sort of that long range torpedo spammer. To me, this is a less compelling signal in my opinion. So those would be the combat signals that I would take. All right, so some final thoughts on this. Like I was saying earlier, this feels very much like a very niche ship. I think she makes an excellent backup destroyer. So if you're in division with another, maybe better concealed destroyer or destroyer with longer range torpedoes, her very good gun systems allow her to act as sort of basically some muscle in a cap backing up another destroyer. Her longer range hydro also allows her to be a pretty decent cap contester, like the Z-23 and most of the other German destroyers. Her main weakness, in my opinion, on that front is the range of her torpedoes. So at 6 kilometers, that's going to be generally barely enough to get across to the other side of a cap, in a lot of cases. So it's, there's an argument to be made that this is a decent cap contester, but her torpedoes, in my opinion, are kind of her weakness on that front. But otherwise, So far, I've only played a couple of games with her. I have liked her a fair amount. I'm going to need to play her more to get a stronger feeling. I knew what I was buying into. I'm already very familiar with German destroyer practices. To me, the two things I kind of wish that I think where she's deficient is the fact that she doesn't have a speed boost and the fact that her torpedoes are such short distance. I love the fact that her gun systems are so strong. In particular for a German destroyer, I think that would come as quite refreshing for a lot of destroyer players who have historically found German destroyers as kind of not very strong on the gun front or the gun power front. She does pretty well at tier-VIII, and she definitely outstrips the Z-23 in terms of DPM. So she could be quite strong in that perspective. So if you understand her limitations, she is quite likely to be something that I think if you were interested in buying her, you could enjoy a great deal. I think she does have some decent strengths, but she has some important limitations that you have to keep in mind if you were to enjoy a ship like this. So I think that's going to wrap up my initial review and opinion and first impressions, I should say, of the ship. Feel free to leave any questions or comments that you have in the description below. Again, I love hearing from the audience and happy to answer whatever questions that you may have. Thanks much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the information in this video. And as always, we hope to see you out there in the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.